Leviticus 11 revealed the real message God intended about what you put in your body. Prayer at any time. The moment you realize your inner life is out of control. There comes a moment when you can no longer ignore what is happening inside you. Everything on the outside may seem manageable, but within there is noise, tension, a constant sense that something is not aligned. Your thoughts do not slow down. Your emotions shift without warning. And even in silence, your mind feels crowded. You try to fix it the way you were taught. Change your routine, distract yourself, stay busy, avoid what hurts. But the problem remains. Because what is happening inside you is not being caused by what surrounds you. It is being formed by what is entering you. This is the part most people never confront. You are not only reacting to life, you are being shaped by everything you allow into your mind, your attention, your focus. Every word, every image, every idea leaves a mark. And over time, those marks become patterns. This is why you feel overwhelmed without a clear reason, why your peace feels unstable, why your thoughts return to the same cycles. It is not random. It is the result of accumulation without awareness. And here is where the truth begins to press against you. You cannot change what you feel if you do not confront what you are feeding. You cannot expect clarity while allowing confusion to enter freely. God revealed a principle that many overlook when he spoke in Leviticus 11:1-2. He did not begin with emotions. He began with intake, with what is allowed and what is rejected, because he understands something most ignore. What you consume will define you. This is the moment where everything can begin to change. Not when life becomes easier, but when you become aware of what has been shaping you. And once you see it, you are faced with a decision you can no longer avoid. The invisible inputs shaping your emotional state. You do not notice most of what is shaping you. That is why it is powerful. It does not announce itself. It enters quietly, repeatedly, and without resistance. And over time, it begins to influence how you think, how you feel, and how you respond to life. Your emotional state is not created in isolation. It is the result of what you have been exposed to, what you have entertained, what you have allowed to remain. Conversations, content, environments, internal dialogue. All of it forms a current that moves beneath your awareness. You may believe your anxiety comes from a specific situation, but often it is the accumulation of small, unnoticed inputs. Thoughts you did not question, messages you did not filter, influences you accepted because they felt normal. This is why you can feel overwhelmed even when nothing significant is happening, because your inner world has been filled gradually, without structure, without selection. And what fills you will eventually express itself through you. There is a discipline that changes this completely, the ability to recognize what is entering before it settles. To become aware of what you are allowing to shape your perception. This is where control begins. Not in reacting to emotions, but in managing what produces them. Because once you start to see these invisible inputs, something becomes clear. If you do not choose what enters your inner life, something else will choose for you. And that realization leads to a deeper question. If nothing is happening, why does your mind still feel so full? Why your mind feels crowded even when nothing is happening? You sit in silence, yet your mind does not follow. There is no immediate problem in front of you, no urgent situation demanding your attention, and still your thoughts continue moving. One idea leads to another. One concern awakens another, and without warning, you feel mentally exhausted without having done anything. This is not because your mind is broken. It is because it has been filled without rest. You have allowed too many inputs without processing them. Too many impressions without resolution. Too many thoughts without order. Every unresolved thought occupies space. Every fear you entertained without confronting remains active. Every influence you absorbed without filtering continues to echo within you. And over time, your mind becomes a place of accumulation instead of clarity. You may think you need more answers, more strategies, more solutions, but the truth is different. Your mind does not need more. It needs less. It needs space. It needs structure. It needs you to decide what deserves to stay and what must be removed. God never intended for your inner life to function in constant noise. His pattern reveals order, distinction, clarity. But when everything is allowed to enter, nothing can settle. And when nothing settles, peace cannot remain. This is why you feel crowded even in silence. Because silence outside does not mean silence within. And until you address what is filling your mind, that noise will continue. And this leads to a deeper realization. You are not only overwhelmed, you have become dependent on this constant stimulation without even noticing it. The addiction to emotional overstimulation. You may not call it addiction, but the pattern is there. The constant need to check, to scroll, to think, to feel something intense. Silence becomes uncomfortable. Stillness feels unnatural. And without realizing it, you begin to seek stimulation just to avoid facing what is within you. Your mind has adapted to intensity. It expects movement, noise, input. When those are absent, it creates its own. It revisits old fears, imagines future problems, amplifies small concerns. Not because they are real, but because your inner world has been trained to stay active. This is how overstimulation works. It does not only come from the outside, it continues from within. And the more you feed it, the more it demands, until peace no longer feels normal, and calm begins to feel empty instead of restful. You may think you are trying to feel better, but often you are just avoiding stillness. Because stillness exposes what has been building inside you. And facing that requires something most people resist: attention without distraction. God's design was never for your mind to be constantly overloaded. His pattern reveals rhythm, rest, order. But when you live in constant stimulation, you lose sensitivity, you lose clarity, you lose the ability to discern what is actually happening within you. Breaking this cycle requires more than awareness. It requires a shift in how you relate to what you allow. Because once you see the pattern, you are faced with a decision. Continue feeding what keeps you unstable, or begin filtering what enters your inner life. And this is where a deeper principle emerges. Not everything that reaches you should be received. The spiritual principle of selective intake. There is a principle that changes everything once you truly understand it. Not everything that reaches you deserves access to you. This is where many fail, because they assume exposure is harmless. They believe that as long as they are not acting on something, it does not affect them. But what enters consistently will always leave a mark. Selective intake is not about isolation. It is about intention. It is the discipline of deciding what is allowed to shape your thoughts, your emotions, your perception of reality. Without this, your inner life becomes open territory, influenced by whatever is most present or most persistent. You are not designed to absorb everything. You are designed to discern, to recognize what strengthens you and what weakens you, to filter what aligns with truth and reject what distorts it. This is not automatic. It must be learned. It must be practiced. When God speaks in Leviticus 11:1-2, He establishes a clear distinction. Not everything is meant to be consumed. There is a separation, a boundary, a decision required. And that same principle applies beyond the physical. It applies to everything that enters your inner world. The moment you begin to apply this, something shifts. You stop living reactively. You begin to choose intentionally. And what you choose begins to redefine how you think, how you feel, how you respond. Because once you start filtering what enters your life, another realization follows. The environment you surround yourself with is not neutral. It is forming your identity. When your environment becomes your identity, you may think you are simply surrounded by your environment, but the truth is deeper. Over time, what surrounds you begins to shape you. Not only your behavior, but your perception, your expectations, your sense of what is normal. Your environment is not passive. It is formative. The conversations you hear, the content you consume, the people you observe, the atmosphere you remain in. All of it creates a framework that influences how you think without asking for your permission. This is why change feels difficult for many, not because they lack desire, but because they remain in environments that reinforce the very patterns they are trying to escape. You cannot expect clarity while remaining immersed in confusion. You cannot expect stability while constantly surrounded by instability. At some point, what is external becomes internal. What you hear repeatedly becomes what you believe. What you see consistently becomes what you accept. And what you accept begins to define who you are becoming. God never treated environment as something irrelevant. His instructions always created separation, not to isolate, but to preserve identity. Because without separation, identity dissolves into whatever is most dominant around you. You must begin to ask a different question. Not only what you feel, but what has been shaping what you feel. Because once you recognize the influence of your environment, you begin to see something clearly. If there are no boundaries, there will be no stability. And where there is no stability, anxiety begins to take root. The hidden link between anxiety and lack of boundaries. Anxiety often feels like something that comes from nowhere. It rises suddenly, without warning, without a clear cause. But when you look deeper, there is usually a pattern behind it. A lack of boundaries that allowed too much to enter, too much to remain, too much to accumulate. When there are no boundaries, everything competes for your attention. Every demand feels urgent. Every thought feels important. Every emotion feels valid. And without a filter, your inner life becomes overwhelmed by what it was never meant to carry. Boundaries are not walls to isolate you. They are structures that protect you. They define what has access to your time, your energy, your focus. Without them, you become available to everything, and being available to everything will always lead to exhaustion. You may think your anxiety is caused by external pressure, but often it is intensified by internal openness without discernment. You have allowed too much to enter without deciding what should stay, and what stays begins to weigh on you. God's design was never for you to live without limits. His pattern always includes separation, distinction, clarity. Because where everything is allowed, nothing is ordered. And where nothing is ordered, peace cannot exist. To establish boundaries is to take responsibility for your inner life. It is to recognize that not everything deserves your attention, your agreement, or your emotional investment. This requires discipline. It requires awareness. It requires the courage to say no. And once you begin to establish these boundaries, another truth becomes evident. Clarity does not come from adding more. It comes from removing what does not belong. Why clarity requires elimination, not addition. You have been conditioned to believe that the answer is always more. More information, more strategies, more input, more effort. But the reason you feel unclear is not because you lack something. It is because you are carrying too much. Clarity does not come from accumulation. It comes from removal, from identifying what does not belong and having the discipline to eliminate it. Because every unnecessary thought, every misplaced focus, every irrelevant influence competes for space that should be occupied by what is true. Your mind was not designed to hold everything. It was designed to process what matters. But when everything is treated as important, nothing can be prioritized. And when nothing is prioritized, confusion becomes constant. This is why you feel uncertain even when you have enough information. Because clarity is not the result of knowing more. It is the result of seeing clearly what must be kept and what must be removed. God's pattern has always been selective. Not everything is included. Not everything is accepted. There is a deliberate process of separation. And that separation creates order. To eliminate is not to lose. It is to refine. It is to remove what weakens your focus so that what strengthens you can remain. This requires discipline. It requires honesty. It requires you to let go of what feels familiar, but does not serve your growth. When you begin to remove what does not belong, your mind starts to settle. Your thoughts become clearer. Your direction becomes more defined. Not because you added something new, but because you created space for what was already true. And this leads to a decision that is not easy, because once you see what must be removed, you are faced with the cost of disconnecting from what has been weakening you. The courage to disconnect from what weakens you. There is a moment when clarity demands action. You begin to see what is affecting you, what is draining you, what is quietly shaping you in the wrong direction. And in that moment, knowledge is no longer enough. A decision is required. Disconnecting is not comfortable. It challenges your habits, your routines, your sense of familiarity. What has been part of your daily life, even if it has been weakening you, feels normal. And letting go of what feels normal creates resistance. This is where courage becomes necessary, not the kind that is loud or visible, but the quiet strength to choose what is right over what is easy, to step away from what does not build you, even when it is accessible, even when it is accepted by others. You may try to justify staying connected. You may tell yourself it is not that serious, that you can manage it, that it does not affect you as much as it does. But the truth is revealed in your inner state. If something is disturbing your clarity, weakening your discipline, or feeding instability, it is already costing you. Disconnecting is not loss. It is protection. It is the act of preserving your inner life from what erodes it slowly. It is the decision to prioritize your formation over your comfort. God's design has always included separation as a form of preservation. Not everything is meant to remain connected to you, and when you refuse to separate, you carry what was never meant to stay. This decision reshapes your direction. Because once you disconnect from what weakens you, you create space for something stronger to take its place. And this leads to a deeper understanding. Your mind is not only a place of thoughts, it is a field of influence. And if you do not govern it, something else will. Mental discipline as a form of spiritual warfare. What happens in your mind is not neutral. It is a constant movement of influence, direction, and formation. Every thought you accept strengthens something. Every thought you reject weakens something. And over time, this process defines the condition of your inner life. You may think your struggle is only emotional, but it is deeper than that. It is a battle over what will take authority within you. Truth or distortion, clarity or confusion, order or chaos. And this battle is not fought outside. It is fought in your mind. Mental discipline is not about suppressing thoughts. It is about governing them. It is the ability to recognize what aligns with truth and what does not, and to act on that recognition consistently. Without this discipline, your mind becomes a place where anything can settle and take control. This is why many feel defeated without understanding why. Not because they lack strength, but because they have not developed control over what they allow to remain in their thoughts. They entertain what weakens them and question what could strengthen them. God's design has always required intentionality. Not everything is accepted. There is discernment, there is selection, there is resistance. This is not passive. It is active alignment with what builds stability. When you begin to discipline your mind, something changes. You are no longer reacting to every thought. You begin to choose which thoughts deserve your agreement, and over time your inner life becomes less chaotic, more ordered, more stable. But there is a subtle trap that many fall into. They replace discomfort with distraction and call it peace. And this confusion prevents real transformation from taking place. The difference between distraction and true peace. You have learned how to escape, but not how to rest. When discomfort rises, you reach for something to silence it. A screen, a thought, a task, a conversation. And for a moment, it works. The tension fades, the noise quiets, and you feel relief. But it does not last. Because distraction is not peace. It is interruption. It delays what is unresolved, but it does not remove it. What you avoid returns. What you silence temporarily continues underneath, waiting for the moment when you are no longer distracted. This is why you can feel calm in one moment and overwhelmed in the next. Not because something new happened, but because what was already there was never addressed. It was only covered. True peace is different. It does not depend on constant stimulation or escape. It comes from order within, from knowing what you allow, what you reject, what you stand on. It is stable because it is built, not borrowed. Distraction weakens your ability to face what needs to be confronted. It trains you to run instead of stand. And over time, this pattern erodes your inner strength. You become dependent on temporary relief instead of developing lasting stability. God's design was never for you to live in cycles of escape. His pattern reveals clarity, stillness, alignment. a peace that remains even when there is nothing to distract you. To experience this, you must stop replacing discomfort with noise. You must face what is within and bring it into order. This requires discipline. It requires honesty. It requires you to remain present without escaping. And as you begin to distinguish between distraction and peace, another transformation becomes possible. Because once you stop escaping, you can begin to rebuild your mind on something stronger than your feelings. Reprogramming your mind through truth, not feelings. There is a pattern that keeps many people trapped. They wait to feel different before they think differently. They wait for motivation before they change direction. They expect their emotions to lead them into clarity. But emotions do not lead. They respond. If you build your inner life on what you feel, it will always shift. What feels right today may feel uncertain tomorrow. What feels strong in one moment may collapse in another. This is why relying on feelings creates instability. Because feelings are not designed to be the foundation. Reprogramming your mind requires a different approach. You begin with truth, not emotion. You decide what is real, what is aligned, what is stable, and you allow that to guide your thinking, even when your emotions resist it. This is not easy. It requires you to act against what feels natural, to reject thoughts that seem convincing, to replace what is familiar with what is correct. But this is where transformation begins. Not when you feel ready, but when you choose to align with truth. God's wisdom was never based on emotion. It was based on order, clarity, and direction. And when you begin to think according to that pattern, something shifts. Your emotions no longer dominate. They begin to follow. Over time, your mind becomes less reactive and more grounded. You begin to recognize patterns before they take control. You begin to interrupt what once defined you. And slowly, your inner life starts to stabilize. But for this process to deepen, something else must be introduced. Because clarity does not grow in constant noise. It requires space. It requires stillness. The power of internal silence and reflection. There is a kind of silence that most people avoid. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of distraction. The moment when nothing is covering what is inside you. And this is where truth begins to surface. When you remove noise, you begin to see clearly. Thoughts that were hidden become visible. Patterns that were ignored become undeniable. And what once felt confusing starts to reveal its structure. This is why silence is uncomfortable for many. It exposes what distraction was hiding. But this exposure is necessary, because you cannot change what you refuse to face. Reflection is what allows you to examine your inner life with honesty, to recognize what is aligned and what is not, to see where you have allowed disorder to remain. God's pattern has always included moments of separation, of stillness, of intentional withdrawal, not as escape, but as realignment. Because clarity is not found in constant activity. It is found when you pause long enough to see what is true. Internal silence is not emptiness. It is space for order to form. It is where your thoughts begin to settle, where your perception becomes sharper, where your decisions become more intentional. When you practice this, something changes. You are no longer overwhelmed by everything at once. You begin to process, to organize, to understand. Your inner life starts to take shape instead of remaining scattered. And as this clarity grows, you begin to recognize the importance of something that must be lived daily. Because reflection without action does not sustain change. What you see must become what you practice. Living with intentional mental boundaries. Clarity without boundaries does not last. You may see what needs to change. You may understand what has been affecting you, but if you do not establish limits, the same patterns will return. Awareness reveals the problem, but boundaries sustain the solution. Living with intentional mental boundaries means you no longer allow everything to enter your thoughts unchecked. You begin to decide what deserves your attention, what deserves your agreement, and what must be rejected immediately. This is not automatic. It requires vigilance. Your mind is influenced continuously. If you do not guard it, it will be shaped by whatever is most present or most persistent. This is why boundaries are necessary. They create a line between what is accepted and what is not. Without that line, everything blends together and clarity is lost. This is where discipline becomes practical. not in what you say you believe, but in what you allow to remain in your thinking. You begin to interrupt thoughts that do not align with truth. You begin to refuse what weakens your stability. You begin to reinforce what builds strength. Over time, these boundaries become natural. What once required effort becomes consistent. Your mind becomes less vulnerable, less reactive, more ordered. Not because life has become easier, but because your inner structure has become stronger. God's design has always required intentional separation. Not everything is allowed. Not everything is embraced. And when you begin to live this way, your inner life starts to reflect that same order. And as this structure becomes established, something visible begins to emerge. Because when your inner world changes, your outer life begins to reflect it. The transformation that happens when you take control of your inner world. There is a point where the change is no longer theoretical. It becomes visible. Not in dramatic ways, but in how you think, how you respond, how you carry yourself through situations that once unsettled you. You begin to notice that what used to trigger you no longer has the same effect. The thoughts that once dominated you lose their intensity. The emotions that once felt overwhelming begin to settle more quickly. Not because life has become easier, but because you are no longer reacting without direction. This is what happens when you take control of your inner world. You stop being shaped by everything around you and start shaping how you respond to it. Your decisions become intentional. Your reactions become measured. Your mind becomes clearer. You are no longer easily influenced. You are no longer carried by every thought that appears. You begin to stand with stability, even when circumstances shift. And that stability creates something most people are searching for without understanding it. It creates peace that is not fragile. This transformation is not built in a moment. It is the result of everything you have practiced. Observing, filtering, rejecting, aligning, disciplining. Each decision strengthens the structure within you, and once that structure is established, something becomes undeniable. You no longer need life to be controlled in order to feel stable, because what matters most is no longer outside of you, and this leads to the final realization. You do not need a different life. You need a different order within yourself. You don't need a new life. You need a new internal order. You have been looking at your life, thinking something outside needs to change. A situation, a result, a condition. You told yourself that when things align, when pressure decreases, when uncertainty fades, then you will finally feel at peace. But now you see something different. The instability was never only outside. It was within, in what you allowed, in what you tolerated, in what you never questioned. And as long as your inner life remained without order, no external change could sustain peace. You do not need a new life. You need a new structure within the life you already have. Peace is not something you wait for. It is something you establish. Through discipline, through clarity, through the decisions you make about what enters your mind and what stays out. Through the alignment of your will with what is true, not with what is easy. This is where responsibility becomes unavoidable. You are no longer unaware. You cannot return to the same patterns without recognizing their cost. And this is where your strength is tested. Not in what you understand, but in what you choose. You can continue reacting to everything that happens. Or you can begin to govern yourself, to define what has access to you, to build an inner life that does not collapse under pressure. Circumstances will not always cooperate. Life will not always be predictable. But your inner order can remain stable if you choose it. Peace does not depend on what happens to you. It depends on what you allow within you.